There she is. Christa Ramey joins us, trial attorney out in Los Angeles. And along with her is David Otunga, trial attorney in Chicago, Illinois, also a world-renowned professional wrestler and friend of the show. And joining us by phone, we have some technical difficulties, from Beverly Hills, California tonight, is criminal defense attorney, prosecutor David Katz. Welcome to you all. You know I have to go ladies first, guys. I'm sorry. But Christa, third-degree charges. Families asking for first degree. Do you think it stays at third, or is there a way to charge with second degree intentional or first degree premeditated intentional?
I think, Vinny, that we just don't know. I think right now these charges are appropriate for what we've learned so far. We know that third degree is depraved indifference. To prove intent and to prove premeditation for a police officer in an encounter like this is very difficult in the best of circumstances. While it is true that intent can be formed like at the very moment that the killing happens, we don't know what they have right now. So I guess the short answer is that they can increase the charges to include second or first degree based upon what they find. This investigation is far from over.
Yeah, but we do have an 8-minute video. They got the body cams. We have the mugshot now of Derek Chauvin. That's the former officer now charged with third-degree murder. There it is, folks. That's your first look. David Otunga, as we look at this mugshot, do you see this as a third degree or a second degree or a first degree?
You know, I definitely see it as a third degree. I mean, there obviously was no care for human life. Depraved heart. I mean, look at those eyes right there. They're soulless. The way he just stayed on Mr. Floyd's neck. He didn't care if he lived or died. Now, interestingly, there's a part that came out in the complaint when it says that Officer Kung came over and checked for a pulse and said he didn't feel one. After that, none of the officers moved. In fact, Chauvin kept his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck. It looked like he even drove it in a little bit deeper. That, to me, at that very point, Vinny, that seems like intent. Now, that could be second degree. Now, let me posit something else. It came to light recently that Chauvin was a security guard at a nightclub, the same nightclub that Mr. Floyd worked at. So it's possible they knew each other. They worked together previously. Now, if they had had some kind of beef, this could be first degree premeditated. When Chauvin encountered Floyd in this situation, we don't know what their history was, but it opens up the possibility there was a history and there was possibly premeditation. Again, this is just possible.
Right, part of that continuing investigation that we're talking about. David Katz, how do you see this? First degree, second degree, third degree, something else?
Well, it's great to be with you, and I think those are all excellent points. What they've charged him with now is third degree, and the idea is that he perpetrated this act, which they said was eminently dangerous and which evinced a depraved mind, but without him having the kind of intent that would get the case to second degree or to first degree murder. In Minnesota, first degree murder is ironically either of a police officer or with premeditation. And so your other guest made an excellent point that they may be finding evidence right now which will really give them a case of either second or first degree murder against this officer. It may be he had a beef with Floyd. It may be that he has an animus against African-American people. That's something else that seems to be perhaps out there. And, you know, both as a federal prosecutor, I had the murder of a postal carrier in those days. And it was a difficult first or second degree murder case. But, you know, the officers did a lot of digging. Hopefully the police officers looking into this police officer or the FBI will look into his background and do the kind of investigation that they do now against our clients, now that we're criminal defense attorneys, where they dredge up every little thing, they look on the computers, they look at all of these contexts, and they find out, did the person have a motive? And of course, as the demonstrators believe, and as so many of us who are disgusted by this believe, we suspect that this officer had a lot more than just committed an act that ended up having eminently dangerous consequences. The 8 minutes, the staying there on top of his neck with his knee, This is the kind of case that really does call for very serious penalties. And that's why people are demonstrating, and that's why it brings back so many bad memories. And people say it's like we saw a lynching on live TV, or at least on a recording. And now that we have 3 recordings of it, it's really horrendous. And it does seem like third degree is too little. But, we'll wait and see, as they say.
Let me throw this out there. And David Otunga, I'll let you respond to this first. In order to, as a prosecutor, to me, it's a tough hurdle to get over. You have to argue to this jury that this police officer is intentionally committing a murder while he knows people are recording him on a cell phone and in front of, I don't know how many people were there, probably at least half a dozen people are watching. Do you think they can do that?
I agree with you. I think that's an incredibly huge hurdle to overcome. That's why I think third-degree murder is appropriate right now. And, we've had other cases where officers have shot other unarmed black men and they've been acquitted. And many times it's because they were overcharged, where they were charged with possibly first-degree murder, second degree. And it is extremely difficult to prove. But in this case, I think third degree is very provable, very winnable. That picture that they just showed, where he's just staring down, kind of sneering at Mr. Floyd, with his hands in his pockets, no less, Vinny. How was Mr. Floyd a threat? How was he a threat with his hands handcuffed behind his back? This officer had his hands in his pockets, almost like gloating, showing off. Look what I'm doing with one knee. Yeah, that's a depraved heart right there.
That struck me as well. The hands in the pocket.
Go ahead, Christa.
Just as a human being, I think that when any of us just saw this video, I think I've cried a lot this week. And when then I saw the videos that came out yesterday that showed the other side of the car, with all 3 of the officers kneeling on him, I don't know that there is any excuse for what happened at all. This man should still be alive, Mr. Floyd. And this is a good first step. I am struck by how fast things have happened. I know there's been a lot of complaints that things haven't happened fast, but ordinarily in an instance where police is involved, it doesn't happen this quickly, and I'm grateful that it is. But I don't know that means anything's going to be any different. Third degree is a good charge. My big fear is if you overcharge, then you end up with an acquittal, and we can't let that happen here. So I think that allow them to continue to do their job and gather the evidence that they need. And if they find more evidence that will justify a greater charge, that this is definitely depraved indifference that we're looking at here. Look at that. That's just horrific. Breaks my heart.
A lot of people reacting. We've seen the reactions. One second, I want folks to hear something. You might have a reaction to what I'm about to play. A lot of reactions from a lot of different people, including O.J. Simpson. Take a listen.
Hey, Twitter world, yours truly. This is kind of a sad day, looking at what's going on in Minnesota, especially, the incident itself angered a lot of people. But I think what you're seeing, the reaction is the fear that nothing's going to be done about it. And that's been the case in the past. That's what led to the riots in L.A. after the Rodney King case, was the verdict in Simi Valley. What are you going to do about it? You keep saying this has got to stop. The only time it's going to stop is when you start truly holding the perpetrators to account, start putting them in jail.
There's just a little bit of irony in all that, holding perpetrators to account. But David Katz, O.J. Simpson, jumping on with everyone else to what's going on here.
Well, Vinny, I was going to say that a lot of people who remember the whole trial of O.J. and the verdict are going to find it very, very rich that O.J. is complaining that people are not being held to account for their crimes. But I wanted to comment on another thing, because this always baffles people, that how could a police officer have really committed a wrongful or criminal act when there were other witnesses around? And, the remarkable thing about it, first of all, is that any officer in his or her right mind knows that everybody's recording everything. So the fact that they do these things, I think they become impervious to it somehow, or they think, they're not catching me on it, or they're not catching the spot. Also, with this particular one, it looks like they went around the car just so people couldn't catch what they were doing. It looks like they had him in handcuffs. They walked him all the way across the street. They took him behind that car, and they thought they were shielded from view. And if someone doesn't get that right angle, they are kind of shielded from view. You have to look at it for a while, and then suddenly it's like, oh my God, there's the clear shot of this officer on top of this poor man's neck, choking the life out of him for 8 or 9 minutes. And I had one of these cases after I left the U.S. Attorney's Office as a prosecutor, which I brought against the police here, the LAPD. And in the situation with the LAPD, ultimately the cops never got charged with anything. They never got fired. The city attorney turned a deaf ear. The U.S. attorney turned a deaf ear. And yet we went into federal court and won $2 million when the jury said that these officers had acted criminally. They battered this man. They violated this man's civil rights. And they'd done it right under a street lamp in the projects. And there were 2 witnesses who saw it. And before I ever got the case, a roving reporter had found these 2 witnesses and put them on one of the local TV stations. My point is 2 things. Number one, they did it right there under the lights. They did it right with a couple of people gawking out of the window. And then, it's the LAPD, which sometimes you just shake your head and you think these guys cannot be for real. They changed the street light. And we had to actually get the records to find out that they changed the street light. And they actually argued with a straight face against us in federal court. Officers of the court, attorneys did. It was shocking. They argued that, oh, well, we don't know what the situation was with the lights. So this is the kind of thing that's led to, and I'm not a liberal. I was with the Reagan administration. But when you see the kinds of things that go on, you see the kind of perpetration of wrongs on African-American and minority people, it's what adds up to this explosion, which is not helpful at all. Of course, people should rein this in. But this is what, why this flame gets reignited, even with the pandemic. People are out in the streets.
Absolutely.